Okay, so we're here on Daf Lamed Tes Amud Beis. Yeah?
Yeah.
Good. So we're up to Tanan Hassam. It's like almost smack in the middle of the Amud. Lamed Tes Amud Beis. Right, the first word in the line is Tanan. Is there an easier way of telling you where that is? I don't know. As opposed to the Mitchazia. So if you go up that once, I don't know if that helps anybody. Tanan Hassam. Again, we've been dealing with the issue of a gadol and his younger brothers and what are the preferences. If, let's say, the gadol refuses yibum, where do we go from there? Do we press the gadol to do chalitza, or should we prefer that maybe one of the katanim could do yibum? And then if the katan refuses to do yibum, so do we go back to the gadol now? Or do we say, no, we're already dealing with the katan, let him do chalitza? These were some of the issues that we built. It's not hassam. So this is very interesting because the Gemara here in Yevamot is going to quote a Mishnah in Masechet Bechoros, which is Kodshim. And of all places to find a very fundamental issue that has to be addressed in Masechet Yevamot, in the Sugya of Yevamot, the Mitzvah Yevamot, Yibum, we find it tucked away in Masechet Bechoros. We have to figure out why Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, when he organized the Mishnayos, he did it in that particular way. Mitzvahs Yibum, Kodemes leMitzvahs Chalitza. Okay, this is not foreign to us. We've been discussing this from day one. As soon as we opened up Masechet Yevamot, we were talking about Yibum. We want Yibum. We don't want to leave her in the lurch with a zika so that she can't marry anyone l'shuk, right? So we give her chalitza. That's certainly a fallback position. But what's the chiddush of the Mishnah? That Brishona hayim miskavnim l'shem mitzvah, but achshav shem miskavnim l'shem mitzvah, amru mitzvahs chalitza kodemes lemitzvahs yibum. So again, I can't tell you exactly what point in history this transition was made. For that we have to go to the historians. But the Mishnah is recording already in its time, in the time of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, a transition between mitzvahs yibum kodemes to mitzvahs chalitza kodemes. And a whole bunch of questions flood our mind. I want to focus on a little bit of a technical question, which is maybe less primary and more secondary, but in my mind, it's primary. I want to know the following. When you tell me that today, which again goes back to the Mishnah time, mitzvahs chalitza kodemes, are you telling me, therefore, that yibum is an option? Usually the word kedima means that, like I give you just a mashal, I don't mean to equate it. You have two esrogim, right? So this esrog is mahuda, or this esrog is not mahuda. So this kedima. Kedima means, if all things are equal and you can afford it, buy the one that's more expensive, but it's more beautiful and you have the kiyum of Eden. That's called kedima. Kedima means I prefer one first and the second one second. In order of priorities, I give priority to one over the other. But I'm not excluding the second one. It's still an option. And if a person would buy a less expensive esrog that's not mahuda, certainly he fulfills his mitzvah. He didn't do it with the kedima. Like, for example, we have halachas in kedima like tadir v'sheino tadir koder. So you have two mitzvahs. One is more common than the other. So tadir koder. Right? See, let's say, for example, you would have a choice between musaf and mincha. Let's say it's already time for mincha and I didn't have musaf. So there's an overlap in a time period after chatzos hayom until shkia of both mincha and musaf. Right? So we give preference to mincha and delay musaf. But if he went and he davened musaf before mincha, he may have violated the law of tadir kodem but he certainly fulfilled the mitzvah of Musaf, and he'll fulfill the mitzvah of Mincha when he davens Mincha after Musaf. So the word Kedima in Shas has a very definite meaning. And if you violate Kedima, then you violate Kedima, but it has nothing to do with the Ikar mitzvah. The mitzvah you can fulfill even if you undermine Kedima. So if he went ahead today, Bisman Hazen, he did Yibur, are we going to applaud him? And does he get, brownie points up in Shemayim for fulfilling the mitzvah of Yibur? I would have said, again, if not for the lashon of Kedima, that Achshav She'ein Mitzkaven L'Shem Mitzvah, then he's violating the Isur of Achotz of Eishes Achiv. And Yibum is like being pogea with an erva. But maybe we're saying that even if he doesn't have Kavana, L'Shem Mitzvah, he has a Maisa Mitzvah. He still did the Mitzvah act, and he was Miyabim his Yevamot. You can't deny that.
The article, I'm not too sure where they get it from. Shein mitzvah, they translate, but now they do not have the intent purely for the mitzvah, but then it adds in, but for some ulterior motive. So maybe the intention is for money. He's married on. So it's telling that the article puts.
So then it makes sense to say that if he opted for Yibum, for whatever his ulterior motive might have been, he still fulfills the mitzvah of Yibum. I thought that Shalom is Kavan mitzvah means he.
But it's not the Shema.
Okay, it's not Lishma, but we don't say many mitzvahs Shalom Lishma. If you want to cancel every mitzvah that's Shalom Lishma, we're in deep trouble.
But here, Shein is having the same mitzvah, though.
But now we're not talking about Kavana. We're talking about what motivates him. Does everybody see the difference? Kavana means that I'm doing it for totally secular purposes. It's mundane. It has nothing to do with the mitzvah. That's an issue of Kavana. Here we're talking about a different issue. We're talking about an issue of motivation, of lishma. He knows he's doing a mitzvah, and he wants to get credit for the mitzvah. But that's not enough to motivate him. If you ask me why he's doing it, is because she's a very wealthy woman, and he wants to marry a wealthy woman. The way I understand what you're saying.
Well, that's
from the article.
I don't know what else.
But I'm just pointing out that if you go with that mahalach, then my question is answered. I was bothered by the fact that he's being pogea be'eshes which is an erva. So the answer is no. He has kavanah l'shem mitzvah. It's shalom l'shma. He's doing it for ulterior motives, but he wants to get the mitzvah. Now, it doesn't bother him at all to get the mitzvah. If he can get, extra credit up in Shemayim, he'll certainly be happy about that. I was afraid that he doesn't have a mitzvah at all because his kavanah is for his own pleasure. She's a beautiful woman, etc., etc. He was always upset for the last 50 years that his brother got her and he didn't get her. I don't know. You could write a paid and place movie script about it. I just want to see here in a footnote, number Zion. So he doesn't add anything. He just tells you to wait patiently to see the Gemara. Okay, so far, all we got is a quote from a Mishnah in Bukhara. Amar Rav, Ein Kof. So in other words, Rav is analyzing the position of Bezdin vis-a-vis Yibum today, now it's on, which is called in the Lashon of Mishnah, Af. What is the position of Bezdin when a woman falls for Yibum today? Af. And again, today goes back to the time of the Mishnah. And Rav says, what it means is, Ein Kofin. So I think Rav is interpreting the Mishnah the way we interpreted the Mishnah. That gives us credit if we're on the right track. And Rav is saying that all the Mishnah is preferring Alitza over Yibum, but that's only a preference. the Yavam still has a very viable live option, a real option of Yibum. And therefore, when it says that Aksha is mitzvahs chalitza kodemes, yes, we'll encourage him to do chalitza and we'll discourage him from Yibum, but ain't kofanos. We're not going to force him to do chalitza. He still very much has a live option, a real option of Yibum. Let me just read his note over here. He writes, Ein bezdin kofanos o lachlots, ulehimona miliyab. And bezdin will not force him to avoid Yibum. Yibum is an option, even today.
I want.
What does he say? I mean,
No. I want. Maybe I missed it. That you may have raised it. That if it's not real lishma, that there's the inference of having perhaps he is over Eishasai.
Well, no, I wanted to say if his intention is for the pleasure and only for the then there would be a shesach. But if his intention is to have both, he wants his cake and eat it. He wants to make lots of money in his bank account by marrying this wealthy woman. And at the same time, he wants to be Mekayim in the midst of the Torah of Yibum. His main motivation is money. Then in such a case, I don't think there's any...
might be that, but the Gemara doesn't really come out and say that.
Right. Well, so far, we don't know exactly what it means in the Mishnah in Bechoros, she'ein miskavnin she'ein. We don't know for sure. The Gemara hopefully will clarify it. But working with that commentary that you had before, I don't know if he's quoting anybody in particular, it doesn't matter.
It just says here, there's no...
Okay, whatever it is, it's irrelevant to me. But whatever that commentary, whoever he is, that he's interested in bucks, then I would say it's kavana, but it's not kavana. It is kavana for the sake of mitzvah, but that's not his primary motivation. His primary motivation is the money that he'll get. And in such a case, Bezdin is going to say like this, look, we're going to discourage you. We don't want this kind of you. But we're not going to force you one way or the other. We're going to encourage you to do chalitza, but Yibum is still an option. That's right.
You know, it says it gets it. This comes from later on in the Gemara.
Yeah.
Going to Abu.
Oh, okay. So let's move on. He also lekami derav. Okay, so here's a case where she fell for Yibum, and the case came in front of Rav. So you have who's standing in front of Rav? You've got the Yavam and the Yevamot standing in front of Rav. Amar lahu. So he talks to the Yavam and the Yevamot. Lahu is in plural. Ibayis halos. Ibayis yaben. Two choices. This goes even further than the Mishnah. You follow me? In the Mishnah, we said, "Achshav shemis kavnilin shemitzvah amru chachamim shemitzvah chalitza kodemes." Rav doesn't even seem to have the concept of mitzvah chalitza kodemes. If Rav just would have gone as far as to say ein kofino, so okay, that I can fit into the Mishnah. But Rav is not saying ein kofino. So Rav is saying to the Yavam and the Yevamot, the choice is yours. 50-50. He's not influencing them or tipping the scale in one direction or the other. Iboyes chalotz, iboyes yaben. B'didach tol rachmana. The Torah gave you two options. How do I know the Torah gave you two options? The pasuk says, "Im lo yachpotza ish." I'll read the whole pasuk. L'kacha says yivimto v'choltzana lo me'al raglo. So it says, "Im lo yachpotz ha'im chafetz Everything depends upon his chafetz. Iboy cholitz, iboy yabe. I mean, the psukim are very clear that there are two options given to the Yovam and the Yevamot. We would have thought that those two options were viable at the time of the Bible, in biblical times. But now that the Mishnah says that Eina Miskavnu L'Shem Mitzvah, we, at the very least, we're going to try to push them in the direction of Chalitza. And Rav seems to be denying that. Am I right? Do you hear any slil, how do you say in English, slil, like a tone? Do you hear any tone of kedima in Rav's voice? When Rav turns to them and he says to them, Ibois chalotz, Ibois yabem, v'didach kol rachmana. The ball is in your court. Well, where's the kedima here? Meaning, according to Rav, what did the Mishnah in Bechoros change from the original biblical law and the current law? The Mishnah in Bechoros records such a transition. It says, Mitzvahs yim kodemes l'chalitza. That's only Barishona. And now, Achshav Shem Miskav L'Shem Mitzvah, Amru, Mitzvahs chalitza kodemes. It seems that got lost in the shuffle, according to Rav. Because Rav is talking about Achshav. Rav is after the Mishnah. And he's giving them two equal options without encouraging them in one direction or another. Again, we haven't gotten to another discussion, which we'll have to address eventually. What happens if she wants this and he wants that? She wants Ibam and he wants Chalitza. And the opposite might be true. She wants Chalitza and he wants Ibam. How are we going to work that out? Maybe we need a total, for Yevamot, we might need a unanimous decision on the part of both the Yovam and the Yevamot. If any of them object, then maybe we'll go down the route of Chalitza. I don't know. I'm just saying, you're right. The Torah doesn't spell it out. But the way Rav says it, and he's talking to both the Yovam and the Yevamot, again, you're asking an excellent question. Where did Rav know such a thing? But it sounds like he gathered the troops together. He's got the Yovam and the Yevamot in front of him. And he's asking them, what is your preference? And David is asking me, who asked her? She's not a Baldover here. She has no say in the matter. Okay, so again, all these issues have to be addressed. But what bothers me the most is how Rav will fit this to the Mishnah in Bechoros that we just quoted. It doesn't seem to fit. Because the Mishnah in Bechoros has changed the Kedima from the biblical time to today, changed the Kedima from Kedimas Yibum to Kedimas Chalitza. I don't see in the musical tone of Rav's voice, I don't hear any slil of Kedima. Again, I don't know. If Rav would have started his discussion by just simply saying, Ein Kofin. I understand. Ein Kofin means that there is Kedima, but we're not going to force you on Kedima. We have a certain priority. A comes before B in the priority, but we're not going to force you. We don't beat you up blue, black and blue. That would have been okay, and that I could fit into Kedima. That there's no kfiyah on the kedima. So, for example, if the Mishnah is established that today the kedima is what? Is Chalitza. So we're not going to force the Yovam and the Yevamot to go down that track. They can live. We can live with a violation of kedima. We can live with it. And ain't go for it. We're not going to beat you up. Go for Yibum. Go for it. That's just. But then when Rav turns to this Yovam and Yevamot, in the year 16 centuries ago, whatever it was, and he says to them, what are your preferences? It doesn't seem like there's any preference on the part of Bestin, on the part of the Halach itself. There's no din kedima, but that I don't know how to reconcile with the Mishnah. If you can empathize. The Af Rabbi Yehuda Savar Ein Kofid. Now we're going to look in the words of Rabbi Yehuda, and we're going to try to see that he has the same opinion, the same view as Rav. And he also holds that, we give them two options. How do we see this? Vida asking Rav Yehuda begita de chalitza. In other words, Rav Yehuda created what's called a nusach, a standard, what's the word in English for nusach? A standard text, if you will, for a get. What kind of a get? We're not talking about a get between a husband and his wife. We're talking about a get between a yavam and a yavama, which is called gita chalitza. So, askein, what does askein mean? That's a verb of what noun? Takana, right? Askein means to establish the takana. Rabbi Yehuda himself was the origin of a takana. I guess he gathered together his bezdin. It's not a one-man show, not a totalitarian state over here, but he has the whole court together. And as the head of the court, presiding over the bezdin, they instituted and enacted a certain nusach for the get of chalitza. And what was in that nusach? Now we go through the nusach. Ech plonis, now in a sense, the Eich Plonis starts in the middle of the sentence. So we're going to go back to the unwritten part of the sentence that's omitted here from the. But it means the following: we, the following three undersigned judges, sat together in a court, and she came into the court. Eich Plonis, Bas Ploni. We're not talking about tefillah. Tefillah, you say bas plonis. That's a Gemara in Brachos. But in a get, you write bas ploni. It's like I'm thinking my mother's name was Sima Brina. And her father, my grandfather's name was Elchanan. So Sima Brina bas Elchanan. Kadamna lebezdin, right? She came in front of us to the court. Vishtamudinu. Now, the root of this Aramaic word is modia. Modia is the name of a newspaper of I think the Aguda, if I'm not mistaken, but modia means to notify. And amudinu means she notified us. The achua de misna me abanin. Okay, now we have to take this apart. Ahua means a brother, the misna of the deceased. Right? So the brother of the deceased is what we call a yava. Me'abanin. Hayavam. The achva ninu means that there's only yibum in two brothers that are paternal brothers. Do you remember this, Rabbi Osai? Because of the hekesh to nachla. So it means Reuven and Shimon, both of whom are sons of Yaakov. So they're brothers through their father, the common father. And that's what it means. Achua de misna me'abanin. So it's very interesting that when Rabbi Yehuda established this takana of a nusach for a get of chalitza, he had to write the names not only of the Yevama and not only of the Yavam, but he had to indicate in the document that the Yavam and the late brother, who was married to Plonis Bas Ploni, were brothers from the same father, which would mean he would have to indicate in the star the name of the father of these two brothers, the late brother and the Yavam. The Amrile, and we said to her, meaning we the Bezdin, Savis liyabe. So now at this point, the Bezdin are addressing the Yavam. And they're asking the Yavam, would you want to do Yibum? Yavam, go ahead and do Yibum. Again, this doesn't seem to be any inhibition, neither in Rabbi Yehuda's Nusach Haget, nor in Rav's statement earlier, Ibayis and so forth and so on. No prejudice in favor of Chalitza. On the contrary, the first thing they write in the shtar is, Mr. So-and-so, are you interested in Yibum? Elo, if you're not interested in Yibum, but rather in Chalitza, that's the option you want to opt for. Itla le ragla raglech v'yamina. I want you to stretch out your right leg. Ushras sene me'al raglo. Okay. So now, it's interesting. The Nusach Haget has now undergone a transition. One point in this Nusach represents a very, very fundamental transition. Until now, Bezdin was describing what they told the Yavam when he came in to Bezdin, and how they encouraged him if he so desires to do Yibum. And now at this point, the shtar is edus. It testifies as to what action took place in front of Bezdin, namely Chalitza, because this Yavam decided against Yibum. Elo, we asked him if he doesn't want Yibum, what does he want? He said, yeah, I don't want Yibum, I want Chalitza. And then again, this is testimony in the shtar, Itlale, Ragla Diyamina, the Yavam stretched out his right leg, Sharas, and she loosened, Sine. Sine is the straps. In those days, they wore a sandal. And the sandal had straps that would wind around the leg, and she loosened those strands, those straps. Now you can think of tefillin, like right before Musaf today. We loosened up our straps in order to take off our tefillin. So now, by loosening the straps on this na'al, on this sandal, so to speak, she did chalitza. Chalitza means to remove the sandal from his leg. Again, there's a piece here that's missing, a piece of the puzzle. Did she really remove the shoe from his leg, or did she just loosen the straps and the shoe fell on its own? But that's a very important question in a different chapter in Yevamot. It's called Mitzvahs Chalitza, whether she has to actually pull the shoe off, or it's enough that she loosens it and it's going to fall off on its own. But we're not finished, because Chalitza has another part to it. And what is that? The Yarkis Vianpoi. She has to spit in front of Bezdin. Bezdin has to see this happen. And then they testify it in the shtar. So the word get here, in Rabbi Yehuda's Takana, don't misunderstand it. We're not talking about a classic get. The word get here means a shtar. And this is a document that will testify about Chalitza and will be given over to the Yevamot so she can prove that she's allowed to get married. Ruka de mischazil lebeidina. We were able to see the spit itself, the saliva. I don't know, did any of you gentlemen ever daven in Lubavitch or with the Rebbe? I remember I once davened with Lubavitch Rebbe, Zechar Levracha, and I saw the way he spit during Olim. classy. Mamish a class act. He knew exactly how to control his spit. But it wasn't like, if I would spit, I'd spit, It's like Mamish class. So this all takes place in the presence of Bezdin. She spits on the ground. Bezdin sees the spit, and they write up the shtar, which is called a get. And that get is her testimony that a chalitza was implemented. Now, this is the text of Rabbi Yehuda, the way it was given over the generations. But there's one extra piece that was added to Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, we have this transition. I'm sorry. We have this transmission, I meant to say, of what the Nusach of the get was. But in our transmission, it was a piece written in the get that was missing in this transmission. And then Rabbi Chia bar Avia would add, Messiah, he would add, what did Rabbi Yehuda enact? You missed one very important point in Rabbi Yehuda's enactment of the Nusach HaGet, and that Mishmei de Rabbi Yehuda, and that is Vakrinu Madekasa Bispar Oraisa de Moshe. Because there are two parts to the mitzvah of Chalitza. There's Chalitza, and then there's Kriyas HaParsha. In the context of Chalitza, there's a requirement that the Parsha in the Torah itself be read. We'll see exactly what that Parsha is. He says here that the Parsha says the following: Me'ein Yevami lehakim li'achiv shem b'Yisrael lo ava yabri. So she has to read that part of the Parsha. And in my commentary, I don't know if you have that in your commentary, he says that there's more in the Parsha than that verse. And the other part of the Parsha is read by Bezdin in front of the Yavam and the Yevamot. After they read the first part of the Parsha, when we get to the clincher of the Parsha, that is read by the Yevamah herself. Me'ein Yevami, etc. Have you gentlemen ever seen a chalitza? I think I mentioned to you, I saw it twice, and it's very emotional, especially this part that we're learning about now, that she has to read the pasuk Me'ein Yevami, Lahakim li'achiv shem b'Yisrael. Everybody starts crying. If you've ever seen a get, you're waiting for the 7-piece band to start playing. Because it took them 12 months until Bezdin finally got around to implementing the get. I mean, I should have shut off. That's off the record. See what I'm saying? It's like a holiday in most cases. I saw a sad get once because he didn't really want a divorce. But she insisted, and everybody tried, and nobody could make shalom. For her, he was interested in keeping the marriage going. Go try this, that, and the other thing, try to prove she had kindness against him, that he wasn't this. Anyway, but 99% of the gittin is a holiday. It's a cause for celebration. But chalitz is very emotional. Now, after she reads that pasuk, so we have 3 parts here. Bezdin first reads the background in the parasha. We should open up a chumash. Then she reads Me'ein Yevami, and then the Yavam gets the microphone, and he recites Lo chafatzti lekaf. It's it. I didn't want to marry. In any event, we see that in the Shtar Chalitza, the opening line is Imritzoncha liyabnem yabem, right? Itzavis liyabnem yabem. Clearly, then, Rabbi Yehuda, in his institution, he recognized the possibility of evil. And not only possibility, but it was one of 2 options. And that's Ra. We're not going to force him for chalitza. Okay, let's just 2 more lines and we finish. The Ashtamodinu, now the Gemara wants to go back on that word, that it says that we, according to Rabbi Yehuda's Takana, we write in the Shtar the word Ishtamodinu. which means they notified us, meaning we got the word that this Yavam is a paternal brother to the deceased. And the question now is, how did Bezdin know that they're testifying that we know that this is the real Yavam? Right? Like if you make a call to, I don't know, a credit card company. So the first thing they want to know is make sure that you can prove your identity. They may ask you questions and so forth and so on. So how did Bezdin actually establish that this guy standing in front of him is the real Yavam? Is Pligi bar Ravach Ravina Chad Omar B'Eidim? We're going to need two Eidim Shem to testify that this guy is the Yavam, meaning that he is the paternal brother of the deceased. But Chad Omar, according to another opinion, we don't know whether it's Ravach or Ravina, we don't need Eidim. Afilu Karov. A Karov, a relative, is not kosherly Eidus. But for this identification purpose, even a relative is accepted. I don't know if there's any parallel in secular law, in Western law, because I don't think there's such a thing as a psul kurva in Eidus. Can anyone correct me on that if I'm way off the mark? Like in American law, for example, it matters whether you're related to the guy that you're testifying about, or the such thing.
The wife can't be forced.
Okay, but if she testifies, we accept her testimony. But here in halacha, it's a karov, it's possible, with the exception of this halacha of identification for identification purposes. If you don't have a tudat zahut to identify yourself, then your brother or your wife or any of your close relatives could testify in front of the court to identify. And afilu isha, right? Isha normally is excluded and disqualified from testimony in court of law and Jewish law, which certainly has no parallel in modern Western law. I don't know what it was back then in the day. But in this case of chalitza, to identify the Yavam for purposes of Yipon Chalitza, we accept the testimony of a woman. Ilchasa, how do we paskin? Gili milsa v'almahu v'afilu karav afilu isha. We pass like that by the Omer that qualifies a karav or even a woman for this testimony. Why? Because it is gili milsa v'alma. So both, I'd like you to write that down or memorize it. Because the terminology Gili Milsa is a key to all of Shas. We're lucky here on Dafla and Tessa Beis to encounter it. But if you've never heard about it, you should know about it because it opens up a lot of doors. And there's a difference between testifying on an action, like for example, if let's say Ruvain murdered Shimon, you need testimony on a Maisa, as opposed to Gili Milsa. Gili Milsa means clarify something that's in reality. That exists in the world. You're not talking about a Maisa. We're not talking about any action here. We're talking about identification. Identification is called Gili Milsa V'Al. And we don't have the same standards and requirements of Eidus when it comes to Gili Milsa V'Al. And the Rebbe says, so this is where we'll stop today. And again, I thank you for joining me here live, face to face. Moving along one stage, towards post-corona.
I think just like people that witness a will and such, if you're a beneficiary in that will, I don't think you can witness on that will.
That's what's called a Ge'abe'edus. Right, yeah, but we're talking about Karov or Isha. Right, there are two psulim in Edus. One is no Ge'abe'dover, that you have vested interest, and that's common to both Jewish law and secular law. And then there's a different category, which is unique to Jewish law, which is called the Psul HaGuf. So, for example, Moshe and Aaron cannot testify in a court of law in Jewish law. It's a Pella but that's called the Psul HaGuf. If you're interested in reading about that, Rabbi Meisel wrote a book called Jewish Women in Jewish Law. I have a copy of it somewhere. You know Rabbi Moshe Meiselman? Have you heard of him? He's a Bostonian. So he has a yeshiva here on the street. They call it Tomo.
Okay.
It's Torah's Moshe. His name is Rabbi Moshe Meiselman, but it's not named after himself. It's named after his uncle, who is Rabbi Moshe Soloveitchik. who married off my parents, and my father's ring. Anyway, so he wrote a book called Jewish Woman and Jewish Law. Excellent. He has a whole chapter there to try to explain why a woman is excluded and disqualified from Avis. And it's not because of chashash shek. It's not because we think she's not reliable or credible. It's because of the psul agud. For example, a king of Israel cannot testify to psul agud, or two brothers, like we said. Okay, then Rabbi I'll just shut this off. Okay, thank you. Everyone should have a great day.